So let's take a look at at the geography and some of the place names. Again, the place names are important because the ancient Israelites, when they were hearing or reading the text and they heard a name like Bethel, like Dan, like Beersheba, like Arad, it would conjure up a notion, a thought that sometimes was very politically charged. And so we want to be cognizant of where some of these places are, what some of these cities look like, how they related to one another spatially. First of all, and we're going to move, roughly speaking, west to east. We're going to move from the Mediterranean coast over across the Jordan into the Transjordan region. And we're going to be covering, geographically, we're going to be covering 4 main regions, moving west to east. And the first one's going to be the coastal plains. And the coastal plains are that large, long strip of land that goes from up north along the Mediterranean coast all the way down south. And it is narrow up north, and it is much broader down south. And it includes, in modern, speaking in terms of modern day political boundaries, it includes the Gaza Strip down south, but then up north it's actually quite narrow. The major cities that sat along this strip of land are moving from north down to the south would be Dor, Ashdod moving further down. Well, let me insert here Jaffa and then Ashdod. Ashkelon, Ashdod and Ashkelon were major Philistine cities, and a lot of what we call the Gaza Strip today was Philistine land and Philistine territory. And then you get down a little bit further south and you run into Gaza, and again a Philistine city. As you move inland, as you move to the east, the lowlands or the low hills, the foothills of the central highlands start to come into play. And there you start to move into some very rich farmland and some very fertile land. Down south there is a strip that again starts narrow up around the city of Gezer. And then as it moves south it widens, widens, and widens until it hits the desert and the south, the negev. And this is called the shephelah. And the shephelah was the breadbasket, in particular, of Judah. Very rich, fertile land. Today, it's filled with trees that the modern state of Israel has replanted. And there's hiking. A lot of the Israelis today in the shephelah and throughout the nation, but in particular the shephelah, on Shabbat or other holidays, they'll take their bicycles into parks. They'll go riding in the parks, or they'll go hiking. It's a beautiful region. Major cities in the shephelah are Azekah, there's Lachish, and then again at the very northern tip there is Gezer, a major administrative city in Gezer. Moving further east, inland from the Mediterranean Sea, you hit the Central Hill Country. And the Central Hill Country is divided into 4 units. There is the Galilee, there is Samaria and Ephraim, there is the country of Judah, and then there's the Negev down south. And the Negev, at that point, you run into some very dry desert region, rather desolate region. Some of the times when I've been down to the Negev, I feel almost like I'm walking on the moon, because there's absolutely no life, at least to my eye, that I can see. And when I say that, I mean there's not a dead sprig or twig of plant life. There's not an insect crawling around on a rock. There's not any kind of a reptile anywhere. It's absolutely desolate, and it's amazing territory. Going back up north in the central hill country, and we're talking about Galilee at this point. There's some beautiful, wonderful land up there, and beautiful scenery. It's something today of a vacation spot, the Sea of Galilee and some of those hill country. It's wonderful, rich agricultural land. There is the Valley of Jezreel that cuts east and west and gives passageway into this hill country, and has played a major role in the literature of the Hebrew Bible. Up in the Galilee, there are some major cities that played major roles. Hatzor is a huge site, and prior to Israel, prior to it becoming an Israeli or an ancient Israel site, it was a huge Bronze Age Canaanite city, very important administrative city with a huge acropolis, and then one of the largest tells in the land of Israel. Also up north was major city Dan, and Dan has been excavated for over 30 years. Dan, or Laish, prior to the Israelites coming and taking it over, was a Canaanite city, and there's a magnificent Canaanite gate that's currently being restored as well. Mount Tabor is a magnificent site up there, and so the central highlands, or the central mountains up there in Galilee, is a very rich, significant site. Then you move a little bit further south, and you run into Samaria and Ephraim, and these were the administrative centers of the northern kingdom of Israel. And here in a few sessions, you'll learn about the divided kingdom, and you'll learn about the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah, and you'll learn a little bit more where that dividing line went to. But the central hill country, here a little bit further south from Galilee, this is where Samaria and Gilboa, the mountains, and Ebal, Gerizim, these mountains were all located. Major cities in this area was Megiddo, Samaria, Shechem, Tanakh, Tirzah, Dothan, Shiloh, and Bethel as well. And then, as you move south into the central part of the country of Judah, and there you have the major cities of Jerusalem and Hebron, and then if you moving back to what we've already talked about, but if you move west a little bit, you hit the Shephelah, and there you hit the cities of Lachish and Azekah. But these central highlands was again a part of this ridge of mountains, and it made Jerusalem difficult to access. And one of the few valleys that an army could come up and access Jerusalem was the Ilon Valley at the city Gezer. The city Gezer was an important administrative site because it guarded that valley as armies might try and come up. Another note about this region: it's hilly, it's not very accessible. If any of you have visited Jerusalem, if you're like me, you'll be amazed at how up and down the city is and how up and down the whole region is. These mountains are not high in terms of being 2,500 feet or 3,000 or whatever. It's not that they're high in elevation, but they're steep, and the valleys are extremely deep. And it offered a lot of protection, because for an army to travel through these valleys, they were exposed from above, because they had to travel in such a thin line, and they could be attacked and ambushed from above, and so it created a lot of protection. But it also tended to isolate the country of Judah, and which offered protection for Judah, but also kept it small and a smaller player in the international international politics and the international play. And that turned out in the end to be a good thing, because fewer nations were really interested in or had access to Judah, and so they attracted a lot less attention. And you see then the northern kingdom of Israel having to deal a lot more with predatory kind of nations like ancient Syria and ancient Assyria, and even the Egyptians down south, because the northern kingdom of Israel with the Jezreel Valley and was more accessible to these nations. And you move south from Judah and you run into the Negev. And there in the Negev you see major cities of Beersheba and Arad. And I probably am mistaken to say that Arad was a major city. It is a well-preserved fortress, and it guarded the Negev. It guarded actually the entrance from the Negev into this southern hill country of Judah and Hebron and Jerusalem, and it guarded an access from the south into Jerusalem. And so it was important, an important outpost, but it was a small fortress. Later in the course, you'll visit through some videotape, you'll visit Arad, you'll see exactly how big this small little fortress was. Beersheba was the main administrative site, the main administrative city there. The Negev was a place for Bedouin. It was a place of desert region. Further east and you hit the Jordan Valley. And the Jordan Valley is an ancient fault line of tectonic plates. And you have the earth coming together there and moving there. And it is a very, very low area. The Dead Sea, of course, is the lowest area on the planet, roughly 1,300 feet below sea level. And if you start up north in the Jordan Valley and in this rift, you start with Mount Hermon, which is a mountain of about 9,000 feet above sea level. And it snows there. I understand that they even have ski resorts up there. Those snows provide the headwaters and the springs for the Jordan River that come out at Dan and Banyas and a few other sites. And then it collects together to form the early stretches and reaches of the Jordan River. Then it flowed, in the past, it flowed down south, created Lake Hula, and which was a little small collection of water. Nowadays, that's more of a marshy area that they manage very carefully, because Israel manages its water very carefully. Flows a little bit further south into the Sea of Galilee. Sea of Galilee, 695 feet below sea level. And so already you've gone from Hebron, which is about 9,000 feet above sea level, to Sea of Galilee, which is below sea level. And then there is the Jordan River running today between the boundaries of Jordan and Israel, and running down south to the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea is about 30 to 35% saline and other minerals. And if you ever get to the Dead Sea, it is a worthwhile experience once to swim in it. You can't sink. It is the grimiest, oiliest feeling. It just feels kind of gross. And you want to make sure that when you get out that you shower, because if you let that stuff dry on you, your skin will just dry up and you'll be very, very miserable. And so they have showers there for you to shower off and wash off and everything. I don't think any human being could possibly swallow any of that water, even if they tried. But if they did, it's poisonous. You wouldn't fare too well. If there's any kind of a cut in your skin, you'll scream with pain. It's horrible. But at any rate, it's worth going once and doing once. Every time I've been there, it's been in the summer, in June or July, and it's probably been 115 degrees down there. So it's just amazing. Today, the level of the Dead Sea is shrinking and deteriorating. I think the estimates are that I've heard they're losing about a meter of water a year out of the Dead Sea. And that's because up north, Israel is managing the water for agriculture and for their population and things like that. And water is an issue in the politics of that region. Who controls it? How's it used? It's an important issue. As we move further east, we move into the Transjordan. And so we've hit our fourth of these north-south regions. We started out with the coastal plains, Central Highlands, Jordan Valley, and now we're in the Transjordan area. And this is the area, if we start up north of Bashan, or what is today called the Golan Heights. It's personally my favorite part of Israel and the land of Israel today because it's so beautiful. You get up above. It's a rapid ascent from the Sea of Galilee, and you gain a lot of elevation, and then you get up on top, and it is just as flat as Kansas. And it's a beautiful, interesting region, a lot of good, rich farmland, and it was a stretch of land that was fought over in ancient times because it was a breadbasket, not the only one, but an important breadbasket for whoever possessed that territory. If you move a little bit farther down in the Transjordan area, you run into some Israelite territory, and then Ammon, and then Moab, and then Edom further on south as you go down. Now, in terms of, that's a rough, real quick, brief overview of the geology and the general lay of the land. Weather-wise, it's worth kind of thinking about the weather. The rainfall, again, is seasonal, and rains start to fall in maybe October, but November and throughout the winter. And they pick up the moisture from the Mediterranean Sea and then move eastward. And so in spring and summer, even in the fall, the land, even along the coastal plain and in the highlands, does not get a lot of rain by our standards, but it gets plenty. And those areas were the agricultural areas, and where agriculture was strong, and they fed the rest of the land because rainfall does drop there. And then it hits the coastal plain, and then the elevation goes down again, and the clouds, in essence, have all rained themselves out, and they really don't start to pick up moisture again and start to drop moisture again until you get into the Transjordan area, and they go up the mountains again, and then they start to drop again. And so if you ever visit or have visited Jerusalem, and you stand on the Mount of Olives or Mount Scopus or on some of the peaks along that line, you can look to the west toward the Mediterranean, and you'll see green, fertile, agricultural land. If you can see beyond or get beyond Jerusalem, you'll see that. But then you look east toward Jordan River and toward the nation of Jordan, and it's desert, and it is dry land. And there are stories of occasionally someone from Jerusalem saying to themselves, gee whiz, it's a beautiful afternoon, I think I'll go for a hike in the desert and I'll take a bottle of water, and they'll get lost or disoriented, they'll run out of water, and they won't make it back. This is right out of the city of Jerusalem, because it is so desolate and such a harsh territory that you don't have to travel but 5 miles before you're in a very hostile environment. And I think the thing that surprises me most about the land of Palestine, where this backdrop for all this history, is how fast and how radical the climate and the land and the territory can change in 5 to 10 miles. It's just amazing. Well, in this land, in this geography, there was a certain, and we're going to go through the history here a little bit in a session or two, but I want to just emphasize that this geography hosted a number of nations. There were the Philistines, and there were the Phoenicians, and there were the Ammonites, and the Moabites, and the Edomites, and then there were, and Syria as well. And then there was also not just one Israel, but really 12 tribes of Israel, and a collection of them, 10 up north, and then Judah in the south. And they politically understood themselves for a long time in their history to be separate and different. And so the Hebrew people divided themselves up. And so this was a land that was separated by these different geographic regions, but then also politically separated itself. And then it's worthwhile looking at the broader world picture. And it's worth noting that there is a term, important term to get down in your notes, the Fertile Crescent. The Fertile Crescent starts over in Mesopotamia in the east and swings up along the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, and then moves down along the coast through Palestine. Palestine is sometimes referred to as a land bridge between Africa and Asia, and move into Egypt and along the Nile River. And what this means is that Palestine was, as a land bridge, it was a territory caught in between very strong political powers, the quote-unquote the superpowers of their day. Egypt down south, and then Assyria or Babylon over here in Mesopotamia. And they would converge here in Palestine often. And that meant that on the one hand, Palestine was left and kind of caught marginal, and so these little nation states would crop up and did develop. Ammon, Edom, Moab, Israel, Judah, Philistia, Syria, Phoenicia, they would crop up, but it also meant that they were the prey of these larger entities who would come in and fight for this territory and fight for the access through and to this land bridge. And so again, you can look at these ancient territories and you see highways, major highways that connected and ran and that armies would use. There is along the coast the Via Maris, the way along the sea. And then in the Transjordan area, there is the King's Highway that would run north and south. And then there were less major, more minor roads and highways that would run along the valleys. For example, highways running along the Jezreel Valley, east and west. Highways running through the Aijalon Valley, running east and west. And this was how the people of those days accessed this land. And again, if you look then at that bigger picture, it makes the northern territory, the northern central highlands, the land of Galilee, and in that central area of Samaria and Ephraim vulnerable, because there's a greater access to that land, and the agriculture is stronger in that land as well. Again, I want to summarize by saying that this is the geography and the geology that forms the canvas on which this history was painted. It's the history that forms the backdrop for the ideas and the thoughts that are contained in the Hebrew Bible. And it's those ideas and those thoughts in that literature that we're going to be focusing on in this class. So it's important to understand the geography and the geology and the history, but again, they're the background material for the thoughts and ideas, and that's what we're really looking at. All right, thank you very much, and I will see you again next session.